Everyone, we are live on YouTube and LinkedIn, bringing you yet another exciting episode of our Top Innovator Series. This is where we dive into proven leadership ideas, game-changing strategies, and of course, the brilliant minds behind them. I'm Josef Martens, your host, and I'm excited to introduce today's guest to you. With us today is Niel Nickolaisen. Niel is the Director for Strategic Engagement at Journey Team. He's also chairman of the CIO Council at FC Centripetal, a platform where startups, investors, and corporations are connected. And on top of that, he is also on the adjunct research faculty for IDC. Niel, it's an absolute pleasure having you with us today.
Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Great. Let's dive into the topic of leadership. We have many listeners and viewers who are interested to learn something about leadership, and I would love to know from you, looking back at your successful career as a leader, what do you think are the main reasons that made you successful? What are sort of the secret ingredients behind the success that you've had?
What first comes to mind is, I think, a recognition over time. I think when I started my career, I misunderstood the role of leadership. And I felt like the reason I was in a leadership role is because I was a subject matter expert in some way, shape, or form. And my job was to control my team using my subject matter expertise. But what I learned over time is that I was completely and entirely wrong.
Okay.
And what I learned is that really my job as a leader was to create a culture where people could thrive. And even if that meant walking away from what I consider to be my subject matter expertise. And it was an evolution for me that was based on really some tragic failures that I recovered from. But over time, I think I got better as I understood the role of a leader. And I use an analogy. I was mistaken when I started. I'm not an arts person, but I understand how symphonies work. And there are two critical roles in the symphony. There's the conductor and the concertmeister.
Okay.
And I felt like my role as a leader was to be the concertmeister, to be the best violinist, and everyone would follow my lead. And what I learned over time is I needed to be the conductor, where I left my violin on the chair and I changed my role, and it was to create an environment. And I sometimes describe it this way. My job as a leader is to design the container inside of which the work gets done. But then that begs the question, what is the nature of that container? And so I'm sort of rambling here, and it's a very long answer to a simple question.
So you alluded to it already, that there was some painful experience in that. There was some painful insights. To the extent that's possible here.
Sure.
What created that aha moment for you? What created that recognition, like tool A that I picked up earlier on, or through education or at some other place? That tool just didn't fit the requirements of this situation. What was the aha moment?
Yeah, so I've spent my career until the last year doing a series as a CIO or CTO of these fairly large organizational transformations and technology transformations. People feel that the technology organization, their products, whatever, are underperforming. So they hire me to come in and turn that around. And my first ever turnaround role, we had to replace a bunch of homegrown systems with an enterprise system. The organization had built its own accounting system, things like that. I'm like, no, we're going to put a new system in. And so we made the case to the organization and the board of directors to give me, which at the time was a lot of money, $27 million, 14 months, and a team of 110 people to implement a market-leading ERP system. And I'd already worked at the organization for a number of years, and I knew who I wanted on my team. So I had a core team of 10 people. Well, this was my first real, I'm going to call real leadership role with significant responsibilities. And the track record of ERP implementations was challenged. And so I was going to make sure this didn't fail. So I took 10 people that I trusted completely. And for the next 14 months, to ensure that we deliver the project on time, on budget, on scope, I micromanaged every aspect of their lives. And at the end of the project, when we delivered it successfully, on time, on budget, on scope, I was really proud of the way I had done this work.
Okay.
I thought it was the best leadership job in the history of mankind. And those 10 people who I'd worked with for several years came to me individually in the couple weeks that followed the go live and told me they never wanted to work with me again.
Okay, that hurts.
And because my reaction was, you should be naming your children after me. Because I successfully led this project. But then I started to think I had the self-awareness enough to, I selected these people because they were so good. And if they are telling me I was that bad, I should take it seriously. And so then I really started to reflect and think about who are the leaders that I chose to follow. And I started to learn and gather and talk to others. And one of the mottos I selected that from somebody I really respected was, leaders are those that others choose to follow. They're not forced to follow, they're not pushed to follow. And so what are the characteristics of the leaders in my life that I had chosen to follow? And they had characteristics like they trusted me, they empowered me, they cared about me as a person. And I started to reflect on, okay, for my last 14 months, I was the exact opposite of that. So I need to change. And
that's
so
a deep insight. That's an amazing insight.
And sometimes when I think about this, it was for me a very emotional experience because everything I had done up to that point had resulted in my being given these leadership opportunities. The fact that I was a tyrannical micromanager who wielded, I'm really good at decision making, I'm really good at problem solving. That created these leadership opportunities for me. And part of the realization was, the thing I'm good at is the thing that's hurting me. I need to, instead of thinking I am the world's greatest decision maker, therefore I must make decisions for everybody. I'm the world's greatest problem solver, therefore I must solve every problem. The realization came, no, I am taking people's power away. I'm creating an environment where I'm in effect saying, shut up and do what I tell you to do, which is the exact opposite of the leadership characteristics of the people I chose to follow. And so I had to do this pretty major mind shift where I said, I don't make decisions. I get out of the decision-making business, which means the thing I'm best at is the thing I can never do again. I got to stop problem-solving problems. And so instead I said, my job is to make everyone on my team help them become an amazing decision maker, amazing problem solver. So then I had to just experiment and try. I formed a group called Micromanagers Anonymous, where we did I have my sponsor. If I ever feel like a micromanager, I call somebody. But for me, it's been an evolution where I have to question what I'm doing all the time.
It's a powerful story. And I imagine just describing it makes me get a sense of some of the emotion. And I'm sure at the time it was even stronger. It also makes me wonder, it hurt, right? It was painful. It makes me wonder, is this something that you can convey to someone else in the form of some communication without that person having to live through that? Or is that sort of a necessary baptism by fire for anyone who wants to become a leader in technology, that they experience this shift of, I need to let go of this here to be able to be open for this here?
That's a really good question. What I found in trying to develop leaders on my team, because my real goal when I've got a team that I'm leading is I want to become unnecessary from a let's say from a subject matter expertise perspective. In that conductor role, I'm not trying to be the great violin player or the great percussionist or whatever. And so I'm going to develop that team, which means I'm going to try and teach them and train them and develop them in this leadership philosophy I've now embraced. And I would say for the most part, the vast majority understand it, because if they haven't had a personal experience of the pain of being a pathetic, poor, ineffective leader, they've at least had the experience of having been working for somebody who was like me. And so they've still got that emotional connection. They can still relate to what I'm saying when I say, my job is to create a culture of trust and ownership, trust and accountability. And I'm going to ask you, team, to model that behavior. And then I'm going to also give you permission, if I ever show any indication where I don't trust you and where I'm creating really a culture of low accountability, meaning I'm taking your ownership away, you call me on it. Because I'm still a recovering micromanager.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love the micromanager anonymous. I think this is awesome. So I imagine that during this journey, you probably received advice from people, both in a professional context and in a personal context, maybe some mentors, trusted advisor, close people. Talk to me about some of the advice that you've received from other people to help you get through these challenges.
I would say probably less direct advice, and more just observation for my part. Again, I'm an engineer. I'm good at synthesizing data, and it was obvious to me who was an effective leader in terms of outcomes and culture. If you look at an organization and you say people are doing a really good job and they love being there. Okay, and so I would just ask them, what are you doing? What types of things are you doing? And sometimes, for the most part, they weren't even aware of specific things they were doing. It was, and that's, for me, that kind of pointed out, from a personality perspective, I tend to be more of a controller than a truster. Okay, so then I've got to change this. I've got these people who are natural, I'm going to call them a natural leader. A natural effective leader in the model I prefer, this create a culture of trust and ownership. But that means I have a bigger challenge because I've got to walk away from my natural tendencies. And so I can't think of any particular, there are some people I've encountered some people and worked with some leaders that have given me really good advice and even some really effective models for effective leadership and engagement. But really effective engagement and leadership really comes down to my asking people, talk to me about how you've created the culture in which your team operates, because that's what I learned. That was my insight. Leadership wasn't about being in charge. It was about creating a culture.
Yep.
And so how do you create that culture? And so I learned things like never measure people, measure outcomes. Things like, if something goes wrong, you don't blame a person, you blame and fix the process. Some of these things, these practices they had that supported this culture that I was trying to build, and then also for me, okay, if something goes wrong, I never blame a person. Okay. That's something that was, again, a natural tendency I had. Okay, something went wrong, who messed up? No, right. No one messed up. The process failed them. So let's fix the process. And so it was just these little tidbits I've kind of collected over time that then I would apply and measure the outcomes. And the outcomes were amazing. What I mean by that is I'm doing these massive turnarounds. Before, I always felt I was carrying that burden myself, and that I felt it was important that I become the critical element in success, me personally. And what I discovered was, no, think about the power of, and this sounds selfish, and arrogant, but it's not. What if I have an entire team of people with the ability to transform the organization, not just me?
Mm-hmm.
Not only does that take that burden off me, take that pressure off me, but the outcomes were amazing.
So much bigger, right? Mm-hmm.
We multiply things. So,
right.
So people would say, you know, we've tried this three
right.
times before, it failed every time. Okay, we pulled it off. Why did we pull it off? Because I had a team of 150 that were unified and skilled and capable of pulling it off. And so I got to enjoy all these rich benefits without all the intense pressure. And so I tell people, it's been such a freeing experience for me. And I
interesting.
enjoy life so much more when I don't feel I'm carrying the weight of the future success of the organization on my back. Even though it was kind of fun to think of myself as the irreplaceable, essential element in life. But what it was really satisfying was my own selfishness and arrogance.
There's something counterintuitive to that, right? So the more we're able to step out of that role of bearing the whole world on our shoulder, the more we're probably successful at doing exactly that.
Now, go ahead, Joseph.
We talked about your past. We talked about some of the insights from the past, and I would like to spend a moment on the present and the future as well, Niel. Talk to me about what you're working on at the moment, not in terms of projects, products, or anything like that, but in terms of your own leadership development again. So highly accomplished, no question, right? But when you look at where you are now, where do you feel like this is an opportunity for me to do something different, to level up, to learn? What's that area for you, Niel?
Yeah, for me, so my role's changed by choice over the last year-ish or so, where I've been before leading and taking on these large transformations. And now I'm shifted much more into a mentoring role, like with FC Centripetal, we're a startup accelerator, so I get to advise startups. I've built over time in the Salt Lake area the local CIO association, and so we've developed some leadership training things, and so my role shifted to much more mentoring and advising than owning these massive transformations, which is okay because I'm kind of worn out from all that stuff. But anyway, I feel like I've got a couple of years, maybe 3 to 5 years left, where it's really helping the next generation not avoid my mistakes. Let me put it that way. I tell people everything I've done in life, I did it because I was a total train wreck and I recovered from the train wreck. So what can I do now to help set an organization up for success? So my full-time job, I'm helping people when they start a large implementation. How do you set them up for success? With these startups, how do I set them up for success? And even with my work with IDC, where I'm writing research reports and meeting with IDC clients, really to talk about just how is it possible to be successful in what I think is the most challenging role in an organization, which is the technology leader. Because things change all the time. We go through these massive waves of disruption like we are now with AI. And we have to be highly influential to guide the organization into the future and influence. I actually, over the last 10-ish years, what I've realized, I have to be an influential leader, not a technology leader. I need to advise on technology, but it's beyond technology. It's technology and how it influences and affects the organization. And to do that, I have to have these amazing relationships of trust with everybody in my life. And so I just, to me, it's an ongoing learning exercise for how do I develop my influential leadership skills. How do I make it so people, when I say this, they have enough faith and trust in me that they're willing to try it?
Yeah. Let's assume that's all successful. Let's take a peek into the future, into the crystal ball, as murky as it may be. What do you think will change in the next few years for you? So if we were to have this conversation in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years again, what would be different with you? What would you tell me about what you've learned over the last years at that point?
I think we're on the cusp of I measure disruptions. I tell people, the first massive disruption in my lifetime came right after Al Gore invented the internet. That's for old enough people that will recognize that joke. The next one came with SMAC, Social Mobile Analytics Cloud, where it really changed the way people live their lives. We're in this next one, which is AI. And I think the thing I'm going to experience and learn over the next few years is, how do we help people, humans, through this next wave of a disruption that's probably going to affect them more than the previous ones did. And I've become pretty good at change management and helping people through behavioral change, through technology change. But I think this one's going to be more far-reaching and deeper into the lives of people. And I don't think we still appreciate how to do change management. And I use change management as kind of a placeholder. It's really, how do we help people work through major disruptions in how they live their lives and do their jobs? Yep. And how do we ease them into it? And I think this is going to be at a scale we've never dealt with before.
Yeah. That's a neat focus. I like that, right? Because I really haven't seen much or heard much about helping people through the invention of the internet. Just as an example, going back again, right? Yeah. Of course, the technology is disruptive. Of course, there are massive changes with it. But helping the human side of that, I haven't seen much. Neat. Let me ask you a last question.
Yes, go ahead. And I just said, and this one's happening faster. Yep. The internet rolled out. Social mobile analytics cloud kind of rolled out. AI's been around for a long time. I've done a lot of AI work in the past with machine learning and automation and such. But Gen AI made it much more accessible. And it's changing really rapidly. And then we're combining it with Gen AI with the other forms of AI to now get agentive AI. And it's just a very rapid, if you look at as we come up on 3 years with Gen AI, with ChatGPT, think of how much just the use cases and application of AI have changed dramatically just in the last 2.5 years. Things that we didn't think were possible are now pretty commonplace. And so we're still at the front of that disruption, but I think it's going to be pretty significant.
Yeah.
I tell people, I'm just glad I'm old enough to retire so I don't have to deal with it anymore.
Let me ask you a last question, Niel, and then we'll wrap it up. When you look at peers, other tech executives, other tech leaders, what do you think is something they're missing? Just based on your experience, there's something that you saw, you've got an aha moment, you recognize, you realize something, and at the same time, others are missing it. What
I would say, as I look at, and I was actually having a conversation earlier this week about the number of my peers who have been displaced in the last couple of years. Same thing happened in social mobile analytics cloud. Same thing happened with the internet. And I think because they were focused more on technology than the impact it had on organizations. I didn't grow up a technologist. I became a technologist. And so the technology is interesting to me only in terms of the influence and effect it has on the organization. And because of that, I think some of them lack the curiosity to be on sort of the leading edge and kind of seeking out rather than being more proactive than reactive to the changes that are coming. And so I think sometimes they're surprised when the organization says, what are we doing about this? And that's the first thing they've heard about this.
Yeah.
And again, in my role, I want to make sure I'm the one telling them what the future holds.
Yeah.
Rather than them coming to me and say, how come we're not doing this? Oh, it's the
Right.
first I've heard of it.
Yeah.
And so I think
Shouldn't.
sometimes there's just that people lack the natural curiosity because they're more focused operationally. And I've always thought, okay, I've got really good people on my team that are operational. I need to be pushing the boundaries and exploring the boundaries a little more.
Yeah,
But that's
I
just
like
me.
it. I like that term, natural curiosity, the focus on what might be next or what else is there that I need to find. Niel, it's been an absolute pleasure having you in the conversation.
Thank you.
Many people will find it helpful, and the term of micromanager anonymous, that'll stay with me forever. Thank you so much for that. To everyone else out there, thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to join us again for our next Top Innovator Series broadcast. Remember to like us and subscribe to our channel. And in any case, make sure that your brain cells stay active.